Champions mentality. Athletes, coaches, CEOs, business leaders, military leaders, soldiers, musicians, artists, they all have one thing in common. Well, the good ones anyway, that they're at the top of their field. But with over 7 billion people in this world, how does one separate themselves into the 0.01% of those top performers, those high achievers, the ones that seem like superhumans? Is it luck? Environment? Genetics? These aspects of life definitely play a part, but they're not the main reason that people go from good to great, that people go from a normal person to a champion. They definitely help being in the right place, being born into an environment that's going to nurture that ability, and of course, genetics. But what's the secret sauce? What is that extra little bit that someone has that separates themselves from the rest? Today, I take you, the viewer, through 4 things that athletes have that you don't.
When everybody's all fucked up and you're exhausted and you're weak and you're tired and you're looking around and everybody looks as bad as you or even worse, I'm like, you know what? I want to now make a statement. It's the perfect time to make a statement.
This is my job. This is my full-time job, and I'm not doing well at it. Like, this isn't good. But you know, it's those moments that, you know, you have to, I don't want to say like trust the process, but you know, like stay on your grind.
Elaborate on why I said myself more so than another athlete is that because a lot of times I had to battle with myself to keep challenging myself. You know, that to me was why I would say that the biggest battle was myself, because when you get to a certain pinnacle, you got to find some ways to keep going out there for 82 games.
Number 1, character. The character of a person can be broken into many sub-characteristics, which can be defined truly on what makes up good character qualities of an athlete. Things such as grit, resilience, toughness, hunger, coachability, drive, humility, and dedication. These are all subcategories, and they are vital to an athlete's success in any sport, especially their longevity. Longevity in any sport is a concept generally unheard of, as many athletes trade short-term gains, performance, for longevity. As an example of this, they say that the average NFL player takes 5 years off his life due to the physical stress and demand of the sport. But even at the top of many sports, athletes who show characteristics such as grit, resilience, toughness, hunger, drive, humility, dedication, and coachability tend to stay in the sport longer than their colleagues, performing year after year. Some great examples of these athletes include people like Tiger Woods, Roger Federer, Kelly Slater, Jerry Rice, Gordie Howie, Peyton Manning, Cameron Smith, and I'd even consider Rich Froning because I'm completely biased to CrossFit and he's been dominant in the sport since I was in high school. Many of these athletes, whether they're active or inactive, played at the highest level of the sport well into their 40s, where many of the players they started with retired. They had the ability to continue. With effective process, focusing on what's controllable, they devised their own game plan to continue success long into their later years. Now, to common belief, most champion athletes aren't some superhuman being with powers in a specific sport that set themselves apart from regular people. They are just regular people who are committed to the idea that they have what's called a circle of influence, things that they can directly control, and a circle of control, which are things that are outside of their actual control. Outside of that, nothing else matters. Even though things like genetics play a big important role in what sport an individual will excel at, these are not essential for an athlete's success, and not all athletes start out as champions. Many of them just have what's called a champion's mentality, a growth mindset, a mindset that builds on learning, improving, adapting, a mindset that is resilient and gives them the ability to be coached, hungry, and humble all at the same time. Michael Jordan is in many people's eyes the greatest NBA player of all time, With 6 championships behind his name, it's hard to picture MJ as a regular person. However, many people don't know that Michael was not selected for his high school varsity basketball team for being too short. At 5'11", Jordan decided to join Langley's junior varsity team, scoring multiple 40-point games. Over that summer, he grew 10 centimeters in height and trained vigorously to be selected for the senior varsity team. Upon earning a spot, Michael scored and averaged 25 points per game over his 2-year career. This is just one of many examples of top athletes being what's considered mortal or showing weakness. No great athlete rises to the top and stays there with the 4 components above us: game plan, ability, process, and character. They contain high levels of all 4. Now you might be scratching your head being like, Tyler, there's definitely athletes who've made it to the top purely on genetic potential and talent. And you're absolutely right. A great example of someone who rose to the top of their respective sport, however lacked character, was Mike Tyson. Mike was considered one of the greatest boxers of all time, alongside other major boxing competitors such as Floyd Patterson, Muhammad Ali, Tim Witherspoon, Evander Holyfield, and George Foreman. He won the WBA, the WBC, and the IBF, and held each title, being the one of only 6 people to do so. He was also the youngest heavyweight title holder at just 20 years old and 4 months. He is said to have accumulated over $300 million of revenue in his career. Am I missing the point, Tyler? How is Mike Tyson not a great athlete? I never said he wasn't. All I said is that he lacked character. Mike's life goal was to be crowned heavyweight champion of boxing. After winning the heavyweight championship a few times, Mike spiraled into a depression. Obtaining the only goal he ever strived for, it almost felt like Mike had nothing else to achieve. He didn't believe he could become any better. With the famous ear-biting incident where Mike bit off Evander Holyfield's right ear during the Sound and Fury rematch in 1997, Mike's rape allegations in 1998, filing for bankruptcy in 2003, quitting a fight in the 7th round in 2005 against Danny Williams, a string of drug and alcohol-related charges in 2007, and in a press conference admitting that he almost died from alcoholism in 2013, Mike wasn't perfect, as nobody is. But his lack of character shaded what his true potential could have brought us: a champion and a Hall of Famer of the boxing world. Even though he was the knockout king, with 44 recorded knockouts out of his 50 career fights. You could argue that morally, Tiger Woods is on the same page as Mike Tyson. Being raised by his mother and father, they nurtured his ability as a golf player from a young age. His parents sacrificed, driving him to games, finding him the best coaches. Woods' dad, Earl, spent hours on hours practicing Tiger's shot. Earl Woods was in the military, serving in Vietnam. He believed that success in golf came down to the athlete's ability to mentally endure. So he employed tactics to ensure that Tiger would have razor-sharp focus when it came to his hitting game. Earl did things like coughed as Tiger was about to hit, jingled change in his pocket to distract Tiger. He even threw golf balls at Tiger and stood in front of his line of sight. Earl stated that he wanted to teach him mental toughness. If he was distracted by the little things, he wouldn't be able to handle the pressure of a tournament. But as Tiger Woods got older, the mental torture got more intense. An increasingly brutal, prisoner of war style, psychological battle ensued. They had a safe word. Tiger and Earl admitted that if Earl's shenanigans went too far, if the bullying became too much, all Tiger would have to say is enough. But not only was this word never uttered, but it came known as what's called the E word, a word used by quitters and people who make excuses. I guess with that kind of training, we aren't surprised that Tiger went on to become one of the greatest golf players of all time. His first contract at the age of 20 with Nike and Tigerless was estimated to be over $60 million combined. Tiger's reign was one of the most dominant of any sports player ever. He won 14 majors, 140 tournaments, and he was ranked the #1 golfer in the world for 281 consecutive weeks. He won more than $115 million in PGA Tour winnings, and he has won in every single continent except Antarctica. But even throughout his career on the field was pretty much essentially perfect. It was his life off the field that suffered. In his childhood, his father Earl Woods brought back a mistress from Vietnam back to Tiger's childhood home without his or Earl's wife's knowledge. On tour when Tiger was young, Earl was seen sleeping with women, drinking and gambling, and lying about all of this to his wife. This kind of behavior affected Tiger in his later years, pushing him down a similar pathway. When the news broke of Tiger's affairs with a woman in an Australian hotel, Tiger's career went downhill. He was on a massive dry streak and got more aggressive on field. But this kind of behavior wasn't just happening at the time of the scandal. According to Tiger's college teammates, he left the team to go pro without saying a word. According to family and friends, Tiger would just get up from dinner and leave. And Tiger admitted later in his career that winning and beating an opponent was the most important thing, and that regular people were inferior to him, almost as if they were blessed to have him in their presence. How does Tiger's story differ from Mike Tyson's? It all sounds very similar, and it seems like the best, most dominant force in his respective sport, and then poof, out of nowhere, he was back to square one. It took Tiger over a decade to regain his ability, improve his character, refine his process, and get rid of his demons. But in 2019, Tiger won the major for the first time in over 10 years, proving that grit, determination, and resilience allows even the most broken people to bounce back. Lesson 1. Develop your character. So my challenge for you today, let's develop your character through improving the characteristics that make up you. Whether you're an athlete, business person, soldier, or musician, we're looking to improve one characteristic that we lack in. Let's say we're an athlete and we've failed a PB attempt. We're looking at improving the characteristics around determination, grit, resilience, and coachability. So that next time, the next repetition you perform, you've got a better opportunity of achieving it. If you're an entrepreneur and you're just starting out, rewarding effort, not achievement, will be key. And having grit and determination will help, especially when you see no results initially. If I was going to leave you any single quote to describe character, becoming is better than being. Cal Dweck, mindset. Number 2, the process. Find a job you love and never work a day in your life. This is a top quote, but it's not to only describe your 9-to-5 job, but an athlete's career in any given sport. Athletes who maintain a passion for the sport, even during their peak, will be the same athletes that find a way to improve year after year. When an athlete has good characteristics such as grit and resilience, they have the ability to endure even through hardship, loss, injury, and failure. And unfortunately, this is bound to happen in every athlete's career at some point. But it's the process that an athlete follows to pick themselves up and work hard to get back into the position that they want to be in. That's what separates them from you and me. A great example of someone with a process is US Army Special Forces Warrant Officer Nick Lavery's incredible story of returning to service after losing a leg. This is one of the more unique stories out there. Even though technically not an athlete, Nick's military career is a prestigious one. Being deployed on many occasions to some of the most dangerous places on earth, it was his ability to bounce back after extreme hardship that intrigued me the most. The full video will be in the description, but Nick Lavery and his team were training Afghan soldiers how to shoot, fight, and survive against the Taliban, when one of the soldiers got on the back of a mounted machine gun vehicle and opened fire on Nick and his squad. There were many casualties in this engagement. Many US and Afghan soldiers died in the attack, and Nick was mortally shot in the leg, requiring an amputation. After the amputation, Nick was offered medical military pension. However, he refused the help. Nick spent the next 2 years training to be redeployed, which he was eventually cleared for service. This story not only displays immense character with tons of resilience, coachability, and determination, as Nick isn't just some superhuman. He's just a guy who is so passionate about military life and serving for his country. It also shows that Nick had a process, a way to get him back to the point where he was physically and mentally fit to serve, maximizing his minutes on what the controllable factors are. So you might be asking, what is the process? Now, the process is defined as what you can ultimately control. Some examples of things that you can't control: the weather, traffic, an angry customer yelling at you because you sold out of washing machines. True story. The process is harnessing what is ultimately in our control and maximizing our time in each of those controllable factors. Elite athletes do this very well. But Tyler, what are the controllable factors and how can we maximize these in our own training? The 5 controllable factors of an athlete are nutrition, sleep, training, recovery, and mindset. By improving these 5 factors, this will help us improve our overall ability to have a strong game plan that we can execute on demand. Top athletes just can't be good at these 5 factors. They need to be experts at them. When we think of mindset, many people assume mental toughness, which 9 times out of 10 will be mistaken for physical toughness, the ability to withstand pain. Physical toughness is that ability, withstanding large amounts of pain and uncomfortability. We think about David Goggins running on broken legs. This can definitely come in handy during training, that portion of the process. However, mental toughness is the ability to admit and work on your weaknesses. It is that voice in your head that tells you to run an extra 2 kilometers, even though you only plan to run 5. Making the hard decision of taking the day off to recover your body, even though you want to train. The energy to endure critics and fans when you don't live up to expectations. These are things that play a small part in the overall setting of an athlete's mindset. But oh, there is so much more. Mindset is looking on the bright side in a tough situation. Willing to learn, receive constructive criticism, admit your mistakes, and sit on the bench, even if you truly want to play. Mindset is the approach to training, the execution of sleep, the planning and preparation of meals. Having a strong mindset doesn't come easy, and no athlete will ever hold the perfect mindset. And a great example of a good mindset rule is by David Goggins and what's called the 40% rule. The 40% rule states that when your mind is telling you that you're done, you're really only 40% done. One of the best examples of this rule in use was on a regular person. Jesse Itzler is an entrepreneur and appeared on the Joe Rogan podcast talking about spending a month of his life living with David. The first time that Goggins and Jesse met was during a 100-mile ultra marathon, where Jesse was running as a part of a 6-person relay team, and met Navy SEAL David Goggins, who was doing the entire race solo. During a gym session that Jesse and David were performing together, David challenged Itzler to perform 100 pull-ups. Jesse, after completing 8 and almost quitting, said to David that there was no way he could complete the remaining 92 pull-ups. This is where Goggins applied his 40% rule. Remember, when your mind is telling you you're done, you're only 40% done. It took Jesse another 2 hours. However, he completed all 100 pull-ups. When we think about nutrition, people assume that if I eat real foods and stay away from things like cookies, cake, and chocolate, that I'll be on the same level. However, Super Bowl champion Tom Brady not only is an expert in his own nutrition, but in his book TB12 Method, he states that he drinks a gallon of water a day and cuts out any food that causes him high inflammation. The level of detail is what separates the good from the great. Remember, the process is the ability to maximize results in areas that we have full control over. You can't control the weather, but you can control exactly how you eat. by maximizing food portions, timing, macronutrients, and micronutrient content down to the minute, you are putting yourself in the best possible position to perform. By listing the 5 aspects of sport and working out how to maximize each component down to that minute, these top athletes set themselves apart from their competition. But this feat isn't something that you can perfect. It's about getting as close as humanly possible, which takes character. Lesson 2. Create your process. But I challenge you to improve the process that you have in place for your hobby or career. What can you change that's within your control? And are you maximizing these controllables down to the minute? The best way to start is by listing the 5 main controllables of process: nutrition, sleep, recovery, mindset, and training. And work out of that list which one you need help with the most. Are you putting 100% into your training sessions? Do you opt for the fast food meals and takeaway over a home-cooked, healthy, nutritious meal? Are you getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night? Are you so sore that you can barely get out of bed in the morning? Are you someone who whines, complains, and makes excuses? Write down each category, what you're doing within each one, and then start from the one that you're the weakest at and work your way up. And I'm gonna leave you with a quote from Ben Bergeron, coach of Katrin Davidsdottir, CrossFit Games champion of 2015 and 2016. Difference between a regional athlete and a CrossFit Games athlete. All athletes train 4 to 6 hours each day. It's what's in between the ears of the Games athletes that separates themselves from the rest. Number 3, ability. Pretty straightforward here. You either have a natural ability or you don't. Once again, this is a common misconception used by fixed-minded teachers and coaches who believe that you're either born with it or you ain't. In her book Mindset by Carol Dweck, she discusses the differences between an athlete who are told they are talented and athletes who are told that they are not. Many of the so-called talented athletes suffer from what's called a fixed mindset, showing a lack in character and not having the ability to handle criticism or being coached. They assume because they are already naturally gifted, they don't need to exert any effort or work on any of their weaknesses. And this is their downfall. As mentioned in part 1, Michael Jordan was an athlete who didn't begin with massive amounts of ability, but worked hard to become who we see him as now. One of the more notable things that Jordan did was after every game, whether it was a win or a loss, whether he played well or he didn't, he would shoot 100 3-throw shots. Yes, he definitely has some genetics behind his character, but with the effort, commitment, and passion that drove him to become the best player of all time. This is not just natural talent. And natural talent will only get you so far. There's no denying it though. There are definitely people who are born with more ability or natural talent and that are genetically gifted than others. But these only make up a small portion of important factors that make an athlete elite and allows the same athlete to continue to perform. Lesson 3, your ability. Ability, my challenge to you. What is something that someone has told you you can't achieve? Were you ever labeled as someone who was dumb or stupid? Were you ever considered special, talented, smart? Maybe it was gym class and you thought you weren't athletic or had any special talent, no genetic potential in that particular area of training. Whatever someone with a fixed mindset or even yourself with a bit of a fixed trait has told yourself and you've believed, let's try and exceed it. My challenge to you is exceeding your expectations of you or anyone else who's told you differently. My personal endeavor this year has been to read more books. During high school, I was told I was someone who just wasn't good at reading. But naturally, I couldn't focus on the books, nor the words coming out of them, which is why I invested in audiobook. Audiobook has allowed me to read without reading, to focus on learning without actually picking up a book, and is probably the most effective and one of my greatest achievements of 2020. My goal was to read 12 books from October to March. I have currently completed 6 books thus far. Number 4, the game plan. The game plan combines all of the elements discussed previously into one great big calculated plan. Even though anyone can make a game plan willy-nilly, the idea behind having a game plan is a course of action, a pathway, a direction to head towards. However, there are a few components within the idea of having a good game plan that is essential to executing the right plan for you. Goals. Goals are one of the more popularized components of having a game plan. A parent's goal is to get their newborn child to speak, walk, and function more independently. A coach's role is similar to a parent. Get a team to work together, function, and play to achieve a certain result, which generally there's some form of big title, trophy, or accolade that's achieved. For a regular person, their goal could be to lose 5 kilos, get a raise at work, or find a partner. However, what defines a goal is its measurement. What is measured is improved. It's easy to say that my New Year's resolution is to eat cleaner, but there's no actual measuring stick, no specific targets or quotas to hit, and there's no way to see if I'm going in the right direction. That's why having an observable, measurable, repeatable goal will not only allow us to see how far we've come, but it will mark progression. And that's the key word, progression. Goals are pointless if they are be all or end all. Like Mike Tyson's story, his goal was to become the world heavyweight boxing champion. He achieved that, and not much else. Do you think Tom Brady was content after winning his first Super Bowl in Super Bowl 36? Absolutely, for the moment. But then he set his sights on 5 more championships. A goal is a marker set out in a never-ending road of progression. Even the best can become better. Matt Fraser, undoubtedly the most dominant CrossFit athlete, has won 5 consecutive titles. Each one is just as glorious as the last. In his first 2 years competing at the CrossFit Games, they were plagued with character traits needing to be addressed, an inexperienced process, lack of ability in certain areas such as handstand push-ups, and no real game plan when it came to his training. But after the second place finish, Matt decided to fix all areas that had let him down in the past to become what seemed like an unstoppable force. But what changed? Everything. Having a solid game plan, backed by an athlete's ability that he or she understands their own limits, capabilities, strengths, and weaknesses, and having a clear process in place, focusing on what's controllable and by maximizing the time spent on each one. This is what separates the good from the great. So what exactly is a game plan? A game plan is a pathway to achieve, regardless of whether it's a short or long-term plan. To progress in any aspect of life, you need a plan. Lesson 4. How to develop your game plan. Don't just make goals. Make a pathway to success. Goals are a marker of progression. Even the best can still improve. So there's no limit to your goals. What is it that you're truly passionate about? Find it. What do you want to achieve? Make a pathway for it. And then set goals as markers and make sure that these goals are observable, measurable, and repeatable. Because losing weight isn't a goal. It's just a statement. There's no emotional connection. It's just words. But losing fat because you're too self-conscious to have sex with the lights on, now that's a goal and a pathway to greater things. Those were 4 things that athletes have that you don't. Share it with a friend, colleague, or family member. Check out my website, absolutebeast.org, for more emails, programs, and more. And leave a comment down below of any changes that you have made because of this video. And as always, you guys at home, stay a beast.